She lives in some basement apartment downtown. You know. My Aunt Diane's stage whisper carried across the funeral home reception area. Meant to sound sympathetic but landing somewhere between pity and contempt. 30 relatives who de-gathered after my grandmother's service turned to look at me, the family disappointment in my simple black dress. The one who'd supposedly never launched, never succeeded, never made anything of herself. Then my phone rang, vibrating against the silence, and I glanced at the screen. Mayor Franklin. I had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether to silence it and preserve the fiction my family had built around my life, or answer it and watch 15 years of carefully maintained boundaries explode in the most spectacular way possible. But when the mayor's voice came through the speaker, "Jenna, I'm so sorry about your grandmother. Take all the time you need. The city can wait." My aunt's jaw didn't just drop, it practically hit the floor. My name is Jenna Walsh, and I am about to explain how I spent 15 years living in a historic brownstone owned by the mayor while my family thought I was barely scraping by in a basement apartment. Let me take you back to where this beautiful misunderstanding began. I was 23 when my grandmother first got sick. Stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive treatment, the kind of crisis that reorganizes a family. I'd just finished my master's in public administration from Georgetown and landed a job as a junior policy analyst for the city of Philadelphia. The salary was $48,000, not terrible for a first job, but not impressive to my family, who measured success in 6-figure incomes and corner offices. My parents had expectations. My older brother Tom was a cardiologist. My sister Amanda was a corporate lawyer. And then there was me, public sector nonprofit adjacent, doing work that didn't translate to dinner party conversation. Policy analyst, my father would say, his tone suggesting I'd told him I collected trash. What does that even mean? I analyze policy for the city. I'd explain. Urban development, housing initiatives, community programs. So government paperwork. Close enough that I stopped correcting him. I found an apartment in Old City, a garden level unit, in a beautiful brownstone on a tree-lined street. The landlord was Robert Franklin, a semi-retired businessman who'd served on various city boards and commissions. He was in his late 50s, kind, asked thoughtful questions about my work. Public administration, he'd said when I applied. We need more young people committed to public service. The rent was reasonable, $1,200 for a one-bedroom, and the location was perfect. 10-minute walk to City Hall. My family visited exactly once, when I first moved in. My mother took one look at the garden-level entrance. You had to walk down 4 steps from the sidewalk and her face fell. "Oh honey, a basement apartment. It's called garden level, Mom. It has amazing natural light, and it's underground," Aunt Diane said, peering in with obvious concern. "Is this safe?" "It's Old City. One of the safest neighborhoods in Philadelphia." My father checked the locks like he was inspecting a crime scene. "How much are you paying for this?" $1,2 for a basement. He shook his head. "Tom's paying $3,500 for his place in Rittenhouse, but at least it's above ground." After that, they never visited again. When they asked about my living situation, I'd say still an Old City, and they'd nod with that particular brand of parental disappointment that doesn't require words. What they didn't know, what I never bothered to correct, was that my basement apartment was actually the garden suite of a $2.3 million historic brownstone. That my landlord was about to become one of the most important people in Philadelphia, and that my own career was advancing faster than anyone in my family imagined. 6 months after I moved in, Robert Franklin announced he was running for mayor. It was a surprise to everyone. He'd been successful in business, served on nonprofit boards, but never held elected office. "Jenna," he'd said, catching me as I left for work one morning, "I hope this won't be awkward, but I'm running for mayor. If that makes you uncomfortable as a tenant, I completely understand." "Why would that be awkward?" "Well, you work for the city. Conflict of interest concerns, that sort of thing. I'm a junior analyst in the housing department. I don't think anyone will care who my landlord is." He smiled. "Still, if I win, things might get complicated. Media attention, that sort of thing. I want you to know your lease is solid regardless." Robert won the election by a comfortable margin. Suddenly, my landlord was Mayor Robert Franklin, and my quiet brownstone was regularly visited by security details and policy advisors. My career was also advancing, though I didn't broadcast it. I'd moved from junior analyst to senior policy coordinator to, by age 26, director of housing initiatives. I was managing a team of 12, overseeing a $50 million budget, coordinating with federal housing authorities. But when family asked, I just said still working for the city. They heard, still stuck in that entry-level government job. The truth was more interesting. Mayor Franklin and I had developed a unique working relationship. He valued my policy expertise. I was briefing him on housing issues, attending cabinet meetings, helping shape his urban development agenda. By my late 20s, I was effectively his housing policy director. Though my official title was still in the city's housing department to avoid nepotism concerns. Jenna, he'd said one evening, finding me working in my apartment, I need to be transparent about something. I'm offering you a position as deputy mayor for housing and community development. I'd looked up from my laptop, stunned. I'm 28, and you're the best housing policy mind I've worked with in 30 years. Age is irrelevant. The optics, me being your tenant, are fine. You've been working in housing policy long before you moved here. Your appointment is merit-based, and we have documentation to prove it. But I wanted to ask, would you prefer to move? To avoid any appearance of impropriety? I'd looked around my apartment, the exposed brick, the garden view, the home I'd made. I'd prefer to stay, if that's acceptable, then stay. Just be prepared for some scrutiny. The appointment made local news. Mayor Franklin appoints 28-year-old deputy mayor ran the headlines. There were the predictable questions about qualifications, experience, whether this was nepotism. The city council grilled me for 3 hours during my confirmation hearing. I'd presented my policy portfolio, my track record on housing initiatives, my vision for addressing Philadelphia's affordable housing crisis. I was confirmed unanimously. My family's reaction, my mother had called. Jenna, I saw something in the news about a deputy mayor with your name. That's me, Mom. I was appointed deputy mayor for housing. Oh, that's nice. Does it pay better than your old job? Significantly, $145,000. Oh well, that's good. Still not doctor money, but good. That was it. No congratulations. No questions about the work. Just relief that I was finally making decent money. They never asked about my title. Never visited my office at City Hall. Never showed interest in the policy initiatives I was leading, initiatives that were getting national attention. Winning awards, being studied by other cities. Over the next several years, I climbed higher. Deputy mayor to chief of staff to, eventually, senior advisor to the mayor with a portfolio covering housing, economic development, and community initiatives. By 33, I was one of the most influential people in Philadelphia city government. My salary had grown to $195,000. I'd been profiled in Philadelphia Magazine. I'd given TED Talks on equitable urban development. I'd testified before Congress on housing policy. My family knew none of this. When they asked about work, I'd say still at City Hall, and they'd nod sympathetically. Still imagining me pushing papers in some bureaucratic purgatory. Mayor Franklin thought it was hilarious. Your family has no idea what you do. They've never asked, not really. Don't you want to tell them? I tried, early on. They weren't interested. Now it's just, ... Easier this way. Easier to let them underestimate you. Easier to not deal with their opinions about my choices. He'd nodded, understanding in a way only another public servant could. Fair enough. My living situation also never changed. I'd stayed in my garden-level apartment even as my income grew. Mayor Franklin had offered to release me from my lease multiple times. You can certainly afford something more impressive now, but I loved my apartment. I'd renovated it with his permission, installed custom bookshelves, created a home office that was featured in architectural magazines. Besides, I'd told him, I'm paying $1,200 for a garden suite in a historic brownstone. I'd be an idiot to move. He'd laughed. Your rent hasn't gone up in 10 years, I'm aware. I'm not complaining. Neither am I. You're the best tenant I've ever had. Quiet, responsible, and you've helped me rebuild this city. The rent situation was actually deliberate. How is it not fair to me? I'm saving money. It's not fair because you're probably uncomfortable accepting what amounts to a favor from your boss. Consider it retroactive compensation for all the 60-hour weeks I worked before the promotion. We'd settled on a modest increase to $1,500, still well below market rate, with the understanding that if it ever became a political issue, I'd move immediately. It never did. The press was too focused on actual scandals to care that the senior advisor lived modestly in her landlord's brownstone. My family, meanwhile, continued their narrative. At Thanksgiving dinners, My brother would talk about his surgical innovations. My sister would discuss her cases. And someone would inevitably ask, "How's the government job, Jenna?" "Fine, busy, still in that basement apartment." "Still there," sympathetic nods all around. Which brings us to 3 days ago, my grandmother's funeral. Grandma Helen had been the matriarch, the one who'd always believed in me, even when she didn't understand my choices. "You're doing important work," she'd tell me. "Helping people. That matters more than money." She'd passed peacefully at 92, surrounded by family. The funeral was beautiful, packed church, dozens of flower arrangements, eulogies from all the grandchildren. Afterward, at the reception in the funeral home's community room, my family fell into familiar patterns. Tom held court describing a complex cardiac procedure. Amanda discussed a big case win. And Aunt Diane, my mother's sister, always the gossip, always the judge, started her commentary. "It's so sad about Jenna," I heard her say to a cluster of relatives. I was across the room, setting down a plate of untouched cookies, but her voice carried. "She never really launched, you know? Still working some low-level government job. Still living in that basement apartment downtown." Cousin Julie, who I hadn't seen in 5 years, nodded sadly. "It's hard to make it in the city. Rent is so expensive." "Exactly," Aunt Diane continued, warming to her theme. "I mean, she seems happy, but at 33, you'd think she'd have more, a real career, a nicer place." My mother, standing nearby, made a weak defense. "Jenna's always been independent. She makes her own choices. But a basement apartment, Catherine, a basement. With her education, she could have done so much more." I should have walked away. Should have let it go. It was my grandmother's funeral, not the time for confrontation. But then Uncle Robert, not related to Mayor Franklin, just unfortunately, same name, chimed in. "Government jobs are fine for people who can't cut it in the private sector. No ambition required." And something in me snapped. I walked toward them, ready to finally correct 15 years of assumptions, when my phone rang. I pulled it out, ready to silence it, and saw the caller ID. Mayor Franklin. The group was watching me now. Conversations dying as they noticed my approach. I answered. "Hello, Jenna." Mayor Franklin's voice was warm, sympathetic. "I just heard about your grandmother. I'm so sorry. Helen was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," I said, my voice tight. "I wanted to let you know, take all the time you need. The housing committee meeting tomorrow is postponed. Everything can wait. Family comes first." "I appreciate that. I mean it. You've been working nonstop for months. Take a week. 2 weeks, whatever you need." Around me, my family had gone completely silent. They were staring at my phone, clearly having heard the mayor's voice. Also, Mayor Franklin continued, "About next month's rent, don't worry about it. Consider it waived. It's the least I can do given what you're dealing with." Aunt Diane's mouth had fallen open. "That's not necessary," I said. "Jenna, you're my senior advisor and you've lived in my building for 15 years. We're long past landlord-tenant formalities. Your family. Take the rent waiver." "Thank you, Mayor Franklin. Of course, call me if you need anything. Anything at all." He hung up. The silence in that funeral home reception area was profound. Aunt Diane found her voice first. "Did he just say Mayor Franklin?" "Yes, your landlord is the mayor." "Yes, and you're his." "What did he say?" "Senior advisor." "Senior advisor to the mayor?" "Yes. I oversee housing, economic development, and community initiatives for the city of Philadelphia." My mother was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "You work for the mayor?" "With the mayor, technically, I'm part of his senior leadership team." "For how long?" "I've been on his staff in various capacities for about 10 years, senior advisor for the past 3 years. Cousin Julie pulled out her phone and started typing. "Jenna Walsh, Philadelphia mayor, .. double quotes, her eyes went wide. "Oh my God. There's like 100 articles about you. Senior advisor Jenna Walsh testifies before Congress. Philadelphia Housing Initiative wins national award. Walsh named one of Philadelphia's most influential people under 40. She kept scrolling. You've been on TV. You've given TED Talks. You were profiled in Philadelphia magazine." The crowd around us had grown. 20 relatives, all pulling out phones, all Googling me. Uncle Robert's face had gone red. "You're one of the mayor's top people." "I'm his senior advisor on housing and community development." "Yes. But you said you worked for the city." "In some policy job." "I do work for the city. In a senior policy position, Aunt Diane was still stuck on the apartment issue. But you live in a basement. I live in a garden-level apartment in a historic brownstone in Old City. The building is owned by Mayor Franklin, who bought it 30 years ago as an investment property. I've been his tenant for 15 years. He's your landlord, she repeated dumbly. Yes, and my boss. And a mentor. And a friend. I pulled up my phone and showed them a photo ID taken last month. Me standing in City Hall's ceremonial office, flanked by Mayor Franklin and the City Council President, holding an award for our affordable housing initiative. My brother Tom had finally stopped talking about cardiac procedures long enough to process what was happening. You work at City Hall. Like, actually, at City Hall. My office is on the 4th floor. Corner office, actually, with a view of Independence Hall. And you make, $195,000 annually, plus benefits. More stunned silence. My sister Amanda, the lawyer, recovered first. Why didn't you ever tell us? I did tell you. Multiple times. None of you ever asked follow-up questions. You just assumed government work meant low-level bureaucracy, but we thought you thought I was barely getting by. You thought I was stuck. You thought I'd failed. I looked at Aunt Diane. You literally just told everyone I never launched. She had the grace to look ashamed. For 15 years, I've been helping rebuild Philadelphia. I've created housing programs that have served over 50,000 families. I've brought in $200 million in federal funding. I've testified before Congress. I've shaped policy that other cities are now copying. I looked around. At all of them, my accomplished family who'd never once asked about my accomplishments. I didn't tell you because you never cared to know. And honestly, I didn't need your validation. I had Grandma Helen, who understood that success isn't just about money and prestige. Who understood that public service matters. My mother's eyes were filling with tears. Jenna, I'm so sorry. We should have asked. Should have paid attention. Yes, you should have. My phone buzzed. A text from Mayor Franklin. Everything okay? That call felt weird. I texted back. Long story. Tell you later. The funeral reception continued, but everything had shifted. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. Ask about my work. Hear about my apartment, which several relatives now wanted to see. Understand my relationship with the mayor. I answered questions politely but briefly. This was Grandma Helen's day, not mine. After an hour, I slipped out and drove back to my apartment, my basement apartment. My garden-level suite, my home for 15 years. Mayor Franklin was sitting on the front steps of the brownstone when I arrived. I'm so sorry, he said immediately. I didn't mean to cause drama at your grandmother's funeral. You didn't. Well, you did, but it needed to happen. I sat next to him on the steps. My family has spent 15 years thinking I'm a failure. Today they found out the truth. How do you feel about that? Honestly, relieved, tired, a little vindicated. He nodded. Helen would have loved it. She was always so proud of you. She was the only one who ever asked about my work. Really asked, wanting to understand. She understood that the best success is the kind you don't have to announce. We sat in comfortable silence, watching evening settle over Old City. For what it's worth, Mayor Franklin said, you're the best senior advisor I've ever had. This city is better because of you. Thank you, and you're still my favorite tenant. I laughed. I'm your only tenant. Details. 2 weeks have passed since the funeral. My family has been adjusting. My mother calls weekly now, asking about my work. Really asking. My father visited my office at City Hall and was stunned into silence by the view, the staff, the obvious importance of my role. Tom admitted he'd assumed I was just getting by and felt terrible. Amanda offered to help with any legal issues the city might need assistance with her way of supporting my work. Even Aunt Diane sent a card apologizing for misjudging your situation. I've forgiven them, mostly. But our relationship has fundamentally changed. They see me differently now, not because I've changed, but because they finally bothered to look. Mayor Franklin and I had dinner last week. Your rent is still $1,500, he informed me. You tried to waive it at the funeral. I was being supportive. You're still paying rent. Gladly, though honestly, Jenna, you could buy this entire building at this point. Why would I? I have the perfect apartment, a reasonable rent, and a landlord who's become one of my closest friends. He smiled. Fair point. My name is Jenna Walsh. I'm 33 years old. I'm senior advisor to the mayor of Philadelphia, shaping policy that affects 1.6 million people. I live in a beautiful garden-level apartment in Old City, where I've lived for 15 years. And I learned something important. The people who matter will see your worth without needing a title or an address to prove it. Grandma Helen understood that. She saw me for who I was, not what I appeared to be. The rest of my family is still learning that lesson. But they're learning. And sometimes, that's enough.